Well, welcome everyone to the webinar on the global call to action for mutual support for all. My name is Bob Doppelt. I coordinate the International Transformational Resilience Coalition. We put together the mutual support for all call to action with the help of many, many organizations from around the world. And so I want to share in brief form what this is about and the details of it today. And there's much more in the actual call to action that you can get. Before we get going, though, I would just want to take a very brief resilience pause. We always find this helpful to help you just sort of calm. You might have had a long day or been busy, and just sort of take a few deep breaths and just sort of calm yourself and relax yourself a little bit. And as you do that, think about if you know what's happening within you. You are breathing in addition to relaxing yourself, you're breathing in oxygen. And where does that oxygen come from? Actually, the oxygen you're breathing that allows you to live is generated primarily in the oceans through photosynthesis happening in the oceans. And the rest of it, about a quarter of it or so, is happening from photosynthesis in plants all over the world. And so the processes that are occurring around the world and around you are generating the oxygen that allow you to breathe and to live. And the point of that is we are all completely and utterly interconnected with everything else. We think of ourselves as separate individuals, but in fact, we are all interconnected. And that's what the mutual support for all is really about, acknowledging that. So the key message of this webinar and of the global call to action for mutual support for all is that global temperatures are now set to rise by 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit in many places around the world within no more than 5 years. And that means we've entered a very new era that requires mutual support for all. And we've got to get organized now to address the existing impacts that many of you are already experiencing and those that are far worse that are speeding our way by forming resilience networks in community worldwide to accomplish 2 tasks. First, to provide mutual aid to all residents to help them remain physically, socially, psychologically, and emotionally safe, healthy, and resilient during relentless adversities, and use those adversities as catalysts to find new meaning, purpose, and hope in life and thrive during the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, as I'll describe in a second. But that's got to be linked with mobilizing residents, community members, to do their part to reduce the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis to manageable levels and build physical resilience and regenerate local economic, social, and ecological conditions. And the combination of providing mutual support for all and engaging residents in these activities can prevent and heal pervasive mental health, psychosocial, and also many physical health issues, and build safe, healthy, just, and supportive local conditions. So accordingly, with that background, the global call to action for mutual support for all calls on all civic leaders, private sector leaders, and government leaders worldwide to become informed about the interacting causes and impacts of what we call the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, how they can affect mental health, physical health, and psychosocial well-being, and undermine the health, safety, and security of families, communities, and entire societies. So become informed. Everyone has to grasp what's happening. And then they also need to learn what a community-led, not community-based, I'll explain that later in the webinar, a community-led public health approach to providing mutual support for all involves, how to form the social infrastructure in communities and neighborhoods needed to implement it, that we call a Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network, TRCN, but each community group has to designate a name that makes sense to them, and how to organize one and engage in one. So you have to learn what this means and is about. And at the same time, we have to enact policies and establish programs to authorize, support, and fund community-led transformational resilience networks in all urban neighborhoods, mid and small sized communities, and rural areas worldwide. And there's much more detail. I've just given you the three overviews of the calls to action in the global call to action for mutual support for all. Much more detail about these three elements can be found in the document itself. And Christian, who's helping with the technical stuff, can post this site on below that you can go get it and read it. Just a quick background on our organization, the International Transformational Resilience Coalition. We were formed back in 2013, so we're now 12 years old. And we're grounded in both mental health and climate and environmental science. We try to link the two. We started off trying to just build awareness of the mental health and psychosocial impacts of the climate emergency. And we ran workshops and conferences on this issue. Mostly we were focused on individualized mental health services at the time. And then a bunch of members came to us and said, we had members from all over the world. They said, we cannot keep up with the disasters. We have to come up with a very different approach than just treating individuals one at a time after they're traumatized. So we launched what became a 2-year project. We thought it was going to be a 6-month research project, asking people all over the world, reading research, but trying to find out, does anybody got an approach that can prevent and heal pervasive mental health and psychosocial issues generated by relentless adversities? Because that's what the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is. And it turns out there is an approach. It's called a public health approach to mental health. And in many mid and lower income nations, it's called a mental health and psychosocial support group. And so that helped us learn what this is about. We started to run a community of practice about this and with people all over the world. And then early last year, almost 2 years ago now, we became a member of the UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience campaign. And that's where the global call to action for mutual support for all came from. So why should we be concerned about the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis? And the emphasis there is this is much more than an atmospheric climate issue. It has to do with the degradation of ecosystems and loss of biodiversity worldwide too. In last year, 2024, global average surface temperatures increased by 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, above pre-industrial levels for the first time ever in recorded history. Then this year, a study by the World Meteorological Association says temperatures are going to rise by 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, at least temporarily in many parts of the world within 5 years. And at the same time, this year, Dr. James Hansen, one of the noted climate scientists in the world, led a team that released a study that showed that average global temperatures will rise by 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit permanently everywhere in no more than 20 years and likely much less. So this is really a very, very serious issue because 2 degrees Celsius is basically a civilization altering event. But on top of that, 7 of the 9 critical planetary boundaries, as scientists call them, have now been breached. Climate change, biodiversity integrity, land system change, freshwater change, modifications of biochemical flows, introduction of novel entities, ocean acidification. Only ozone and atmospheric levels, almost atmospheric ozone, are in safe areas. All the others are in dangerous areas and getting worse. And scientists have issued a stark warning because those 3/4 of the Earth's ecological system support are outside their safe zone and all show worsening trends. We really have to have a real threat on our hand that we must address. And of course, as all of you know, the impacts of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis include more frequent, extreme, and prolonged disasters that are increasingly traumatizing billions of people around the world. 20 to 40% of the people who are directly impacted by one of these disasters can experience mental health, psychosocial, or physical health issues, and 20% of those others who are just know somebody's impacted or even watch it can be traumatized. And BIPOC, Black and Indigenous people of color, low income, and other marginal populations are at least initially most affected. So you can see the windstorms, snowstorms, heat waves, sea level rise, droughts, floods, wildfires, and many more. But just as importantly, what's being activated, those disasters are combined with and activating cascading disruptions to the ecological, social, and economic systems we all rely on for basic survival needs. And those disruptions are stressing everyone. There are food and water shortages and disruptions, damage to and loss of housing and shelter, damage and loss to transportation, power, water, and other physical infrastructure, loss of businesses, jobs, and incomes, new illnesses and diseases, loss of places, communities, culture, and the natural environment, reduced or lost sense of safety and security, and many other surprising disruptions that create these stress pileups people are feeling. So unless we build population level mental wellness and transformational resilience, and I'm going to define what I mean by transformational resilience here in a second, the impacts that we're seeing are going to create a global epidemic of stresses, distresses, and traumas. Most of us understand what a psychological, emotional, or spiritual distress is. It's worrying about what might happen to us in the future, what might happen to our children, our families in the future, eco-anxiety, solastalgia, and other terms are there, and many, many people are experiencing that. But we're also seeing individual traumas widespread around the world, and that is when an event or series of events shatters the deeply held views people hold about the nature of the world and how they should act and think in it, and it leads them to feelings of hopelessness and creates many kinds of mental health issues, anxiety, depression, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, complicated grief, and others. But we're also seeing widespread community traumas occur. And this is sort of the same kind of reaction as individual traumas, but at a much larger scale. An entire community can experience these kind of reactions, or groups that hold the same religious or cultural backgrounds can experience it. So this happens when an entire community is destroyed by a wildfire or by a flood or by a hurricane. And we're seeing this many places. But we're also seeing then societal traumas. And this is the same reaction again as those community traumas, but at a much larger scale outside of just a specific geographic area, where large numbers of people have their sense of how they make sense of the world, how they react to and think and act in it becomes shattered. The COVID-19 pandemic was a societal trauma. It went way beyond an individual community and way beyond individuals themselves. And unless we institute prevention and healing initiatives worldwide right now, the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is going to become the greatest societal trauma modern society has ever experienced. And it's important to remember that the threats to families, communities, and society is not people with diagnosed mental health disorders. It is the vast majority of all of us now considered normal, who, when their deeply held views of the world and how they should act in it are shattered, can act in ways that harm themselves, harm other people, or harm the natural environment. That's what traumas can do. And many, many, many more people are going to be traumatized. And those the pervasive distresses and traumas can feed on themselves and become epidemics. So unless the traumas that are buried in our nervous system are released, and again, that we hold it in our nervous system and we don't release it, that's what causes these traumas. It can cause people to deny what's happening, to dissociate, disconnect from reality, to blame others, attack others, sabotage themselves by misusing alcohol or drugs or other substances, or to reenact the very same practices that caused the problem in the first place. We just keep redoing it, reenacting it, trying to see if it works itself out somehow, and it rarely does in that way. And it's seen time and again throughout history. The combination of these kind of reactions can unravel families, groups, communities, and entire societies. And just as importantly, these self-protective survival reactions that result from the continual activation of the emotional brain, the limbic system, we often call them fight, flight, freeze, or fawn reactions. they also are blocking solutions to the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. People don't want to engage in change. They just want to try to maintain their own well-being. They're trying to get by through the day and survive. And so they oppose anything that requires, it looks like it's going to require significant change. And that's happening just when new thinking, innovation, and transformational changes are urgently needed to address the crisis. So it becomes a vicious cycle. Just as importantly, there's no physical health without mental health. And this is a quote from Dr. Brock Chisholm, who was the first director of the World Health Organization, general director. There is great comorbidity, as it's called, between mental health and physical health issues. It's very common. When I have a physical health issue, I also am likely to have a mental health issue. I'm also likely to have a physical health issue. And it can be the other way around. Physical health issues can cause mental health issues. Yet few people grasp this, which means that unless we get out front of these issues and institute prevention and healing mechanisms now, the pervasive distresses and traumas that are already being experienced and are coming our way are going to greatly accelerate physical health problems and likely the cost of healthcare as well. What's important to understand is there are very few mental health and human service programs around the world that can address these issues. Professional mental health and human services will remain very important, but for where they exist, when they exist, and for whom they exist. In many nations and in many locations within nations, there are few or no providers, and there will never be enough to assist all of those that are affected by the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. Think about it. If you're a mental health provider, how many people do you see in a day or in a week or in a month? And how many people are in your community that might be affected by the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis? Add that up. Can you help all of those people and or other mental health providers? And just as importantly, mental health and human services also focus downstream. They treat individuals with symptoms only after they appear. They do not proactively work upstream, to use that term, to prevent widespread issues by building population-level mental wellness and transformational resilience. Just as importantly, disaster response and disaster mental health programs, while they remain important, are also insufficient to address what's already happening and what is speeding our way. Disaster mental health and disaster response programs will remain important where, when, and for whom they exist. But in many nations and many regions and in many communities, they don't have the capacity to form or continually support these kind of disaster response programs. And when multiple disasters occur, the disaster response teams that do exist are often stretched thin and or are unable to assist all the hard-hit areas and populations. We just personally had an experience with this last year. My wife's grew up near Asheville, North Carolina in the US, and her sisters and their families still live there. It got hit by Hurricane Helene. There were no emergency responders or disaster response for days there. It was the community, them and their neighbors and friends that helped each other. And that was the key. So this focus alone has no chance of sufficiently addressing the many disasters that will occur as global temperatures rise towards 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. We must understand that we are in a very new era and that we must therefore think and act differently. And this requires actively engaging residents and providing mutual support for all. So what does this mean? Well, first of all, most climate traumas, experiences, distresses, and traumas, and many other traumas today result from interacting individual, family, social, economic, built, and ecological factors. This is the social ecological model. There's lots of research on it on the web. You can go find it. And down at the bottom, it says, yes, it's true that individual factors, early childhood experiences, biology, et cetera, definitely can affect an individual's mental health and psychosocial well-being. But that is significantly influenced by interpersonal factors that wrap around that, the connections people have with their family, friends, and their social networks, and the social norms and values of those networks. all of that is significantly impacted by the community in which these interpersonal connections exist, by the conditions of their neighborhoods, their workplaces, schools, voluntary and civic groups, their religious and civic organizations. All of that is significantly influenced by the structural factors that exist: policies, institutions, power relationships, the type and level of services. And all of this is influenced by environmental factors: the conditions of food and water, open space, green space, the physical and built environment, that is infrastructure, economic and ecological factors. There is an old Native American saying that is, we are shaped by all our relations. And a Bantu term in South Africa, Ubuntu, I am because we are. Since we are, therefore I am. These sayings describe what's true about life and about people, and describes the social ecological model. It's not just individual biology or childhood experiences. It's all these factors that influence us. And research shows that the current dysfunction of many of these interacting societal factors are creating epidemics of distresses and traumas worldwide, and the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is making many of them worse. So to address these challenges, we've got to get out of our professional silos and think systemically and respond holistically. And I'll explain what that means. Yet many of us struggle to imagine the effects of a 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. We never experienced it. How do we imagine it? So we keep doing what we were trained in and what we were already doing. But that's not going to be sufficient. And if we instead try to use these temperature rises, the disasters, the cascading disruptions to the key systems we all rely on for food, water, shelter, etc., if we use them as teaching tools, we can learn, grow, and activate deep-seated transformational changes. And to do that, we must build population-level capacity for what we call transformational resilience. And we have to do that proactively. We have to start now. And what does this mean? It means that when suffering is caused by previously unseen external forces that have no endpoint, no resolution, or no simple cure, that's what the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is. The priority must be to help everyone develop the capacity to buffer themselves from and push back against those stressors, and use adversities as transformational catalysts to learn new about the world and yourself, to grow, adapt, and find new sources, new positive sources of meaning, purpose, and hope, and thrive. One way to think about transformational resilience is to help everyone strengthen their capacity for what we call presencing skills. That is, you become more present, or self-regulation and co-regulation. This is emotional and psychological regulation, to calm the body, mind, emotions, and behaviors during traumatic stresses and help others do the same. That's what co-regulation means. But just as importantly, presencing is very important, but it's not sufficient, because with the stressors and disasters occurring and growing from the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, we also need to help everyone strengthen their capacity for what we call purposing, or adversity-based growth, which means the ability to use adversities as catalysts to learn, grow, adopt new ways of thinking, new practices, and find new strengths, develop new social connections, and in other ways, thrive. And we have found, and I think if you think about it, you might not use those terms, and that's just fine, but we have found that the combination of presencing and purposing can really rebuild faith in the future, because they are primary prevention, helping people learn how to calm their body, mind, and emotions, and help others do so when they're distressed, and then turn towards and use the adversities to learn new things about yourself and others, and find new strengths, new social connections, etc. That is, develop new purpose in life and new meaning, is really what primary prevention is about. And the capacity for transformational resilience is also shaped by these interacting individual, family, social, economic, physical, built, and ecological conditions. So we need to prepare for and respond at the scale of the challenges we face, the scale of the challenges speeding our way. And this means we must think and act at the population level, not just at the individual level, and address all of the interacting stressors seen in the social ecological model. This was reaffirmed by a comment by the noted pioneer clinical psychologist, Dr. George Albee, who said, "No epidemic has ever been resolved by paying attention to the treatment of an affected individual." This is a psychologist saying it, not a physical health person. He's saying we can't just deal with an epidemic of mental health issues by treating individuals one at a time. We have to do more. And this point led us in our research that we did around the world, talking to people to realize that we have to expand beyond individualized mental health services. Again, it will remain important, but we have to expand and use a public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience. What does this mean? A public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience takes a population level approach. It focuses on the entire population, like any public health approach does, not one that merely focuses on individuals with symptoms of pathology or groups deemed high risk, but they are fully integrated into the program using what's called proportionate universalism and life course approaches. And you can look that up. I don't have time to get into the details of that today, but our mantra really has to be leave no one behind. A public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience prioritizes preventing problems before they emerge, not merely reacting to and trying to treat them after they appear. And it integrates mostly group and community-minded healing methods into the prevention strategies. So we must always remember that prevention is the key. And a public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience does so by actively engaging people in identifying and strengthening protective factors, local protective factors, social support networks, resilience skills, local habits, local resources that help build and sustain healthy thinking behaviors, not just trying to fix deficits or eliminate risks or treating individuals with symptoms. We must enhance social connections, strengths, and resources. And research is pretty unequivocal that we can do this. Mental wellness and transformational resilience can be enhanced. And the most effective way to do this is to establish what we call the horizontal social infrastructure. That is to say, connections across the community that we call a multi-sectoral transformational resilience coordinating network, but each community has to use a term, a name that resonates with the local community, that engages a broad and diverse array of local grassroots neighborhoods, faith, spirituality, youth, education, civic, nonprofit, public, and government leaders in developing that come together to develop public health strategies to strengthen existing protective factors and form as many additional ones as possible to build mental wellness, population level mental wellness and resilience. Here's a sample ideal transformational resilience coordinating network. And again, it's a multi-sectoral group. You could call this well-coordinated decentralization using a ring team or a hub and spoke approach. Inside the circle inside is the steering committee, you can call it whatever you want, leadership council. So up at the top of that, you see might be neighborhood leaders moving to the right, private sector, civic leaders, youth leaders, public sector leaders, mental health service, and other NGO leaders, faith leaders. Each of those steering committees is going to be different based on the community or the neighborhood you're working in. They might elect co-chairs and an executive committee that are inside that. And then outside of that, you can see a whole set of what we call resilience innovation teams. And they are working with specific populations that they have expertise in or they're respected by to build that population level mental wellness resilience. So starting up in the upper right-hand corner, there might be teams working with neighborhood groups. Moving to the right, there's teams working with the private sector, local businesses. There's teams working with youth groups, with educational programs, with public sector programs. I'm moving to the left here. Human services organizations. Those focus specifically on the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, arts and culture, et cetera. They're all working together, developing these strategies to build population level mental wellness and transformation resilience within the populations or sectors they work with. But they come back and they share what they're doing, what they've decided with the entire steering committee and all of the other resilience innovation teams. They get feedback, they improve it. Somebody who's working with an education team, with the education team, might say, hey, well, this is great. And it looks like you're focused mostly on public education, but 15% of the people in our community of the children are homeschooled. Have you thought about how to deal with them and how to get engaged them? Oh, no, we really haven't. Okay, let's figure out a way to do that. So you figure out gaps in the populations being served, and they develop coordinated funding strategies. And this ideal transformation resilience coordinating network is actually just almost a model of one that exists already that has been very, very effective. So why do we really need to do this? What is this really about? This is the common phases of disasters. And as you see over on the far left, we often get a warning, a pre-disaster warning that might be years, days, and sometimes just hours, or sometimes not at all. We've had decades of warning about the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis and have done little to address it. But when the disaster occurs, the impacts occur. The big extreme weather event impacts occur. 20 to 40% of those directly impacted, and 10 to 20%, as I said, of others can be traumatized. And then during the phase, during the disaster, or as it begins to sort of peter out, we go through the heroic phase where people who don't even know others put their lives on the line to save others, to help others, to rescue them, etc. It's a wonderful phase. But then what usually happens is towards the end of the disaster, sometimes it's right in the middle of it if it's ongoing, the community cohesion phase occurs, often called the honeymoon phase as well. And this can last for a few days or months, depending on the size of the disaster, where people who don't know each other come together to provide food, water, shelter, medical assistance, and all sorts of other assistance to each other. They're very powerful. This is what we normally hear about after disasters, the heroic phase and the community cohesion phase. And we think that's always going to happen. But actually what happens is eventually people have to go back and focus on their own lives, and the community cohesion phase ends. Again, it could be a few days, could be a month, it depends. And then it enters what's called the disillusionment phase. And this is when people are now back on their own, trying to put their own lives together, and it can last for months or years. And this is when most of the mental health and psychosocial issues emerge, in the disillusionment phase. Some people remain dysregulated for a long time. Most others eventually start to recover. They come to terms with their grief, etc. They work through it, but it can take months or years, but it also can be set back. You can have regression, or it can block recovery completely if a new disaster occurs or new stresses. And eventually, if that doesn't happen, people bounce back. So why do we need to establish transformational resilience coordinating networks? Because the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is going to continue and get worse for decades. Most mental health and psychosocial problems surface months or longer after those extreme stresses or disasters occur. Again, it's in the disillusionment phase. So we need to form the permanent resilience networks that allow residents to sustain that community cohesion phase for decades to come. And we must always remember that our relationships, our social connections, are keys to individual, collective safety, wellness, and resilience during and after disasters. And why do this at the community level again, at neighborhood level? That's because this is where most people spend their time. Most people most directly interact with friends and neighbors, and they most directly interact with the physical, built, economic, and ecological conditions. It is also where most people directly experience the impacts of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. And when people see progress in local activities to build resilience and address local issues, it builds hope, which overcomes the helplessness and hopelessness so many people feel, and which is vital for mental health and psychosocial well-being. Working with single groups in isolation from others, or single issues, just focusing on heat, just focusing on wildfire smoke alone, in isolation from others can be helpful, but it risks reinforcing the siloed, fragmented, and fragmentation and stigmatization that contributes to many of today's problems. So it's really essential to understand there is no community resilience without population level social, psychological, and emotional resilience. Slashing greenhouse gas emissions, strengthening external physical resilience, and regenerating ecological systems and biodiversity are essential to reduce the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis to manageable levels. But most of this is done by NGOs, nonprofits, private or public sector, public agencies, and don't meaningfully involve local residents. They're separated. And the work is usually disconnected from activities that build social, psychological, and emotional wellness and resilience. And frankly, I spent a lot of years in my past in the climate and adaptation field, and I can tell you, for many reasons, our inability to project the exact location, intensity, magnitude, et cetera, of the impacts, many physical resilience projects are going to have limited effect or fail and cost a lot of money. And this is why an equal priority must at least now be placed on strengthening the human, social, psychological, emotional, and behavioral dimensions of resilience. When we did this big research project, we identified 5 foundational protective factors needing to build population level capacity for transformational resilience. And by far, the most important one is to build social connections in the community, in your neighborhood, to provide mutual aid to all. Okay. Here we go. Building social connections is essential to form mutual aid groups in neighborhoods and communities that offer practical assistance and emotional support that enables people to remain safe, healthy, and resilient as temperatures rise. And we say a lot more about what a mutual aid group is in the Global Call to Action for Mutual Support for All document. Social connections are also vital to overcome the toxic isolation and loneliness that is so pervasive today in creating widespread mental health problems. And that loneliness and isolation is made far worse during toxic stresses and acute disasters. Elderly people, people who don't know many others, they are hardest hit when this happens. And when people provide mutual aid to all others, it often motivates them to find new sources of meaning and purpose in their own lives by deciding they're going to assist others in this work. It's very empowering. A second, and I'm reading these sequentially, but they are interactive. The second foundational protective factor is to ensure a just transition by engaging residents in a set of pro-social activities that enhance local physical, built, economic, and ecological conditions. This includes helping to create locally owned and operated businesses that create family wage jobs, healthy and safe public spaces, dealing with the transportation infrastructure, healthy forests and ecosystems, et cetera, et cetera. Unhealthy, unsafe, and unjust local conditions create mental health and psychosocial issues. Yet engagement in pro-social activities that creates healthier and fairer local conditions builds hope that enhances wellness, resilience, and makes people more innovative. And integrating these efforts to enhance local conditions with building human, psychological, social, and emotional resilience can reduce the community's contribution to the climate crisis and motivate many again to find new meaning, purpose in their own lives by committing themselves to helping others engage in these activities. The third foundational protective factor we identified was to foster universal mental wellness and resilience literacy that helps everyone become trauma and resilience informed. And this involves helping everyone understand how trauma affects them and learning those different kinds of age and culturally appropriate presencing and purposing skills. This builds on health literacy. And it helps people understand what's happening within them and within other people when stressed. It's understanding how trauma and stresses can affect your body, mind, emotions, and behaviors. And this can normalize their struggles and reduce their fear of being stigmatized by others and their stigmatization of others because they, oh, this is normal. This happens. I'm not alone. And while building, it also builds the knowledge and skills needed to prevent and heal their own mental health and psychosocial issues, and inspires many people to find meaning and purpose in their own lives by helping others become trauma and resilience informed. The fourth foundational protective factor we identified was to continually encourage residents to regularly engage in a set of practices that are known, research shows, enhances mental wellness and transformational resilience. Finding ways to laugh often, practicing forgiveness, keep learning about things, being grateful for what you do have, caring for the body, and finding simple joys. These activities, active engagement in these activities can release trauma from the nervous system, which helps prevent and heal serious problems and disorders while building social connections through pro-social activities. And it offers activities that foster emotional states that provide residents with meaning and purpose in life. When you practice forgiveness to others and practice forgiveness to yourself, you can find new meaning and purpose in life. And that motivates some people to find new meaning and purpose in their own life by helping others engage in these kinds of activities. And the fifth foundational protective factor that we identified was communities and neighborhoods need to set up ongoing options that allow residents to heal their distresses and traumas. When residents engage in the other four protective factors that I talked about, many of them will be able to heal themselves, prevent themselves from being seriously distressed or traumatized, and or heal themselves if they can. But many people, as the climate emergency, climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis worsens, are still going to be seriously distressed or traumatized. And so the communities should set up a whole range of these activities. And one of which, and one of the better ones, is a group healing gathering facilitated mostly by peers. You can see in the circle, these are healing circles, as they're called, because they normalize struggles and they help eliminate the fears of being stigmatized. If people, when you acknowledge that you're feeling depressed or whatever, because other people are sharing that, and it allows people to hear how others view and are caring for their struggles in a non-judgmental and non-clinical setting. But not everyone is helped by talking about their distresses with others. So other healing options should be offered as well. And you can see that it could be expressive therapies, art and drama, etc., somatic healing, mindfulness-based, spiritual healing, nature-based, or animal therapies, memorial events. The community needs to really zone in, talk to people, and determine what kind of healing options resonate most with local residents and make sure they're involved. And in doing that, some residents are going to be motivated to find new meaning and purpose in their own lives by being trained as peer facilitators to help others engage with these. And as I said before, these foundation protective factors are interactive. Communities start with what makes sense. You might just start with building social connections, and you spend 6 months or a year just doing that. And then you add more as you go, as the community goes, depending on what makes sense. But one of the important things is TRNCs, the Transformational Resilience Core Networks, need to keep evaluating what's going on and who is involved to ensure that everyone in the community benefits from these protective factors. So who shows up for, who's involved with the new social connection and who's not? How do we engage those folks? Who shows up for these healing opportunities and who doesn't? And how do we engage them? Who can we talk with? What kind of other options can we offer? So here's what we've learned from. I didn't share anything that we created on our own. We've learned from all sorts of resilience networks underway in the U.S. and internationally. And here's some examples. In the U.S., North Carolina Smart Start Healthy and Resilient Communities Initiatives has 50 different community groups like this, focused on what they call 4 ACEs: adverse childhood experiences, adverse community experiences, adverse climate experiences, and atrocious cultural experiences, which means racism, etc. But there's a mutual aid disaster relief grassroots network. There's the Virginia's Trauma-Informed Community Network, Peace for Tarpon in Tarpon Springs, Florida, what they call themselves the first trauma-informed community in the U.S., the Community Resilience Initiative in the rural community of Walla Walla, Washington's doing really incredible work. There were 200 of these kind of groups identified in the MARC program, Mobilizing Action for Resilient Communities, mostly focused on ACEs, You can find their list at the Health Federation of Philadelphia. But there's also many examples of international mental health and psychosocial support initiatives that are doing pretty much the same thing, but they're focused mostly on humanitarian issues, child protection, and emergency settings. And the Interagency Standing Committee defined this as a community-based MHPSS approach, puts individuals, communities, and social systems at the center of their intervention in all phases of the response. And you can see more there. Only a few of these initiatives describe their work as a public health approach. Each starts with and emphasizes different local issues and needs. Each is unique, therefore, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. None address all of the 5 foundational protective factors I've described, and only a few are yet explicitly focused on the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. But they all use a common set of principles and methods. And they show that community is the medicine we need. If those not yet focused on the climate ecosystem crisis, they expand to address it, and thousands of new community initiatives are launched worldwide, we can build universal capacity for transformational resilience for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. So how can you help form a transformational resilience coordinated network in your area? They usually form when just one individual or two decides it's a good idea. They start talking with 2 or 3 other people who get excited, and the group continues to talk with and expands others until enough people are interested. They call a meeting and they formalize the network. So you can form a TRCN using a similar approach. Write a brief vision, 2 or 3 sentence vision of a TRCN in your area, how it differs from what's going on now. Identify and share it with 2 or 3 people you know. Have them add to your vision, reshape it, etc., and then share it with more people. Continue to expand it until 8 to 10 people from different populations, or work with different populations, the sectors voice interest, then call a meeting and formalize the group and identify a mission, vision, and specific set of goals. Another approach, nonprofits or government agencies could authorize, support, and fund the formation of TRCNs, but you got to make sure that they are community-led, not community-based. And what this means is community-based initiatives usually occur when a government agency or a nonprofit gets some money. They may ask residents for feedback on what they should do and how they should do it, but they make the decisions on what to be done and how they're going to do it because they got the money and they're responsible for that. And when that funding ends, usually these community-based programs terminate. They end also because the community doesn't feel ownership for it. Community-led initiatives are very different. They are when those transformational resilience coordinating networks, those multi-sectoral networks, make the decisions, decide what's happening, and they might get funding from a fiscal sponsor that's a nonprofit, but they're in charge. And so if they run out of funding, as many of them can do, they continue to go on because the community owns it. So community-led is key. The ITRC launched the High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience Initiative to help form and operate TRCNs globally. And here's, if you're interested, you can apply to participate. And if you do apply, we will designate your group as a prospective Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network. We will provide you with a handbook on how to organize a multi-sectoral steering committee, what a public health approach is, et cetera, and provide you technical assistance in how to do that. Once you have a multi-sectoral steering committee formed, and the steering committee now wants to develop its public health strategy to build population-level transformational mental wellness and transformational resilience, we will invite your group to become an emerging TRCN. And once your emerging TRCN has developed its strategy and is now ready to implement it, we will invite you to become a commissioned TRCN. And we have different handbooks for each level here. So the commissioned TRCN will get a handbook on how to implement and evaluate public health strategies to build population-level mental wellness and resilience, and will provide technical assistance. If you want to apply to participate in this, Christian's going to post this in the chat, but you can go to this website, And this is the CTIP, Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice website, which is a core partner of ours on this. They have more capacity to put this stuff on the website. So you can go there, lots of information there, but you can apply to participate and you'll learn a lot more about the ITRC UN High-Level Climate Champion UN Race to Resilience Initiative. So in summary, temperatures are soon going to rise by 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, in most regions of the world, and permanently, not too far long after that, everywhere. And this is going to disrupt every aspect of society. We have to understand what's happening. We're in the midst of a civilization-altering event. We have to get our heads around this. And in different times, ways, and magnitudes, this is going to distress or traumatize everyone. We are all going to be seriously affected by this. And while important, mental health, human services, and disaster response programs cannot on their own address these challenges. We must think and act differently at the scale of the challenges we now face. We got to get our head around those challenges and the scale of that. And this requires really actively engaging communities and using a public health approach to build population level mental wellness and transformation resilience. So again, just to reiterate, and I'm going to just read what we call for in the global call for action, but then we're going to take some questions if you have some. So think about any questions you have and post them in chat, and Christian will read them out loud to us, to me, and we'll try to get into those. But again, in summary, the global call to action calls on all civic, private sector, and nonprofit leaders, and by civic we mean nonprofit, faith leaders, education, and more, calls on them to become informed about the interacting causes and impacts of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, how they can affect mental health, psychosocial, and physical health, psychosocial well-being and physical health, and how those impacts can undermine the health, safety, and securities of families, communities, and entire societies. So first, get informed. And when you do that, if people have a hard time for political reasons, whatever, talking about the climate crisis, just talk about extreme weather events. People see it, they understand it. Talk about food shortages or rising food prices, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about things people experience in their community right now. Then learn what a community-led public health approach to providing mutual support for all involves, and how to form the social infrastructure needed to implement it that we call a transformational resilient coordinating network, but you can call it whatever you want, and how you can personally or your organization can help organize and participate in one. And then also, as this is happening, talk to local government officials or others to establish policies, enact policies or establish programs to authorize, support, and fund community-led transformation resilience networks in all urban areas and neighborhoods and large urban areas, mid and small-sized communities, and rural areas worldwide. And again, I'm giving you the three basic requests in the call to action. There's many more details that can be found about these in the global call for action that can be found on in the document. And I don't know, Christian, can you copy that and put them into our website? But you can find this on the website. So we urge you all to become informed about what's happening, realize we're in a very new era, and that much of what we've done already and in the past is not sufficient to address what's already happening and what is speeding our way, and to urge you to help organize a community-led transformation resilience coordinating network in your area. So thank you for joining us today. If you have questions, just email us at tr@trig-cli.org. And with that, I just want to see if there's any questions that have come up, and Christian can read them. Just post very short questions, if you would, in chat, and Christian will try to read a few to me. Christian, anything pop up?
Nothing quite yet, Bob, but please, folks, feel free to send your questions in the chat there or reach out via email. Oh, okay, excellent. We've got one. Alrighty. So how do we overcome the societal psychotrauma induced by the actions of Trump, RFK Jr., the chaos, the disillusionment, the disinformation age? How do we kind of take that into account, Bob, as we do this kind of work?
That's a great question. And what's happening in the US now clearly is affecting people all over the US, but it's affecting people worldwide. Um, and one way to think about it is that many people have experienced what's called collective trauma. That's societal trauma. And it's because of changes in society that people have experienced that they just can't get their head around. It shatters their core views about the way the world works and how they should behave in it. And this includes um, it started actually back in the 2008 economic crash, where the federal government bailed out banks and others, and many bankers walked away with millions in bonuses, et cetera. And yet the average person and working class people, many of them lost their homes, their jobs, and their entire incomes. So it shattered the beliefs about the government's on your side, that the banks and corporations will never do anything to really harm you, just to make profit. And that started this slide. A whole bunch of other issues have come up since that time. The key, I think, is to start in your community and just talk with people about practice. Ask them, what do they care about? What's their concern in terms of what's happening in their community right now? And try to engage them in activities that address those issues and get others engaged. It might be food shortages. It might be they don't like this greenway, or they don't like the lack of a greenway or something. Whatever the practical issues are, focusing on that. Stay away from the political for now. Don't talk about climate change or the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. Just focus in on practical issues, share how you think about them, and invite them to participate with others to address those local issues. The vast majority of people respond to that in very positive ways. And then you slowly build from there. You don't ever have, we've worked with communities where they don't talk about the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis at all. They address the lack of living wage jobs. They address polluted streams, the things that affect people's lives, and then build from there outward into a resilience network. Hope that helps. Is there any other questions, Christian?
Yes, thanks, Bob. Just echoing that we will be sending out a video recording of today's session to attendees in the next day or so, so be on the lookout for that. We have some appreciation in the chat. We appreciate everyone for being here. And then we have a question. Do you provide guidance for local groups to work with traumatic reactions to the CEB crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're part of a prospective TRCN, you'll get a handbook that addresses, it's a very thick handbook. It takes a while to read it, but it addresses many of the issues, including what I just talked about before. How do you talk with people and engage people that might have reactions to the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis? But how do you deal with people who are already traumatized, who experience complicated grief, et cetera, in these issues? So we'll provide that information. We offer a community of practice that you can sit in on and participate in. We allow people to talk among each other on the CTIP website, that we have a program, and in other ways, help you learn how to deal with these. And when you find a strategy that works, you share it with others, and other people learn from you. Or you just share, geez, I tried this didn't work. Oh, well, why don't you try X, Y, or Z, that you hear from others. So it's an interactive process. We're all going to be learning as we go forward on this. And we just have to keep adapting, keep learning, and keep realizing that we can do this. We know how to do it. We can do it. We just have to get our heads around that we're in a different era and really have to approach it differently. So we will help you learn as you go along. Any last questions, Christian?
Doesn't look like it, folks. If you have any other questions, I'll drop the email again in the chat here, and feel free to reach out. We always love hearing from folks. So thank you all.
Well, I want to invite you all. You don't have to join the ITRC High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience Initiative to do this work. You can do it on your own. These are already happening. These transformation resilience coordinating networks are being organized or already exist around the world. We urge you to develop one on your own, organize one on your own, bring your friends in, colleagues you work with, and build out and eventually talk to others in your community to do this work. And we just wish you the best at this work. We have a lot of challenges ahead, and we wish you the best in addressing those issues. So with that, I wish you the best today or tonight, depending, or this morning, depending where you're at. And thank you for joining us. Thank you a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.